How to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents is one of the most common questions that we get asked from entrepreneurs and investors, especially those living or doing business in the Middle East. The UAE is popular thanks in part to the country's perceived stability and secrecy and relatively lenient banking environment. And while the UAE is small compared to many other financial centers, it certainly punches above its weight in terms of privacy, financial services, and of course, banking. As the epicenter of stability in an otherwise turbulent Middle East region, several of the emirates may offer the type of stable banking options that you're looking for. That being said, banking in the UAE as a non-resident comes with restrictions. It can be tedious to navigate, and in many cases, opening an account will require a personal visit. In today's video, we'll explore whether the UAE could be a suitable banking hub for you, and we'll look at the 3 most important UAE emirates for banking. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. To help you get started with UAE bank account opening for non-residents, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts. So don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. Also, it's worth noting that the UAE is no longer on the EU's list of non-cooperative jurisdictions. In fact, the UAE was removed in October of 2019. Likewise, the country also doesn't appear on any FATF lists. So it's not considered a high-risk jurisdiction, nor is it defined as a country under increased monitoring by FATF standards. And that's a good thing. It means that the UAE has taken the necessary steps to become a decently transparent country and has successfully met the international standards imposed by regulators and other quasi-government bodies. But should you bank here as a non-resident? Well, that's a big question. And the answer depends on your specific banking objectives and reasons for wanting to bank in the UAE. To start, let's look at banking in the UAE followed by the 3 emirates that are most popular for non-residents to open accounts in. After that, we'll share how you can open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents. We'll also highlight some important and often overlooked non-resident specific restrictions and account opening challenges. What to expect when banking in the UAE as a non-resident. Banking in the UAE can be attractive for a few different reasons, namely secrecy, stability, and diversification. But it's important to note that all UAE banks comply with FATCA and CRS. In fact, the UAE started participating in the Automatic Exchange of Information, AEOI, in 2019. So, if you bank here, expect your information to be automatically shared with tax authorities in your home country or country of residence. Additionally, non-residents are drastically limited in the types of accounts and products they can access in the UAE. And these restrictions are mandated by the central bank. So they're not something that you can negotiate your way out of. On a positive note, the UAE banks have IBANs. This means that you can easily manage transactions to and from partners in Europe. Simply having a bank account with an IBAN can offer huge savings in terms of time and money. IBAN access therefore makes the UAE significantly more attractive than other international banking jurisdictions. Lastly, bank account opening in the UAE will almost always require an in-person visit. We'll discuss this in more detail in just a minute. But ultimately, if you're in search of a remote account opening option, you'll have better luck elsewhere. Where to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents? The UAE is home to 7 different emirates. But from a banking perspective, there are 3 emirates that attract non-residents and expats, which include Dubai, Ras Al Khaimah, and Abu Dhabi. While banks are regulated nationally by the UAE Central Bank, not all banks are present in every emirate. So you may find that the bank selection is better in one emirate over the others. Additionally, depending on your specific objectives and why you want to bank in the UAE, one emirate may be better to meet your needs. How to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents in Dubai. When people ask how to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents, they're really asking about Dubai. One of the main reasons for this is that Dubai is home to some of the most established free trade zones in the world, making it an ideal place for non-resident entrepreneurs and investors to consider doing business. Though, if you're just getting started, you'll likely find Ras Al Khaimah more accommodating and affordable. Additionally, while not as affordable as Ras Al Khaimah, Dubai is less conservative than Abu Dhabi and can be easier to access from a banking perspective. With this in mind, Dubai is often best suited to individuals and companies who do business in the region, have UAE companies, or regularly visit the country. How to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents in Ras Al Khaimah. Alternatively, Ras Al Khaimah is a popular destination for setting up international companies in a tax-free environment. So, it's an interesting jurisdiction for anyone looking to register a new company or just getting started. Like other popular tax havens known for secrecy, such as Anguilla, Bahamas, Cayman, Panama, Seychelles, or Vanuatu, Ras Al Khaimah offers entrepreneurs and investors strong privacy. But, unlike these other countries, Ras Al Khaimah also offers access to relatively stable banking. Unfortunately, bank account opening for Ras Al Khaimah companies isn't as straightforward as most business owners would like. Plus, all the typical challenges of opening a UAE non-resident account still apply. We'll discuss these in the next part of the video. But first, let's take a look at the third emirate that many foreigners are considering for non-resident banking in the UAE, Abu Dhabi. How to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents in Abu Dhabi. If Dubai is the business and shopping center of the UAE, Abu Dhabi is the more conservative, more reputable financial center. So, it's no surprise that account opening in Abu Dhabi can be more difficult than Dubai or RAK. Similar to the UAE's other emirates, Abu Dhabi banks often attract non-residents and their UAE companies thanks to the perceived stability of the banking sector. And in the case of Abu Dhabi, this reputation is well earned. In fact, on several occasions, the Abu Dhabi government has had to step in to save Dubai from collapse. That said, if you eventually intend on opening a company in the UAE, Abu Dhabi will be a more expensive option than both Dubai and RAK. But if you plan on having a true physical presence with meaningful economic substance, Abu Dhabi is worth exploring. How to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents. Now, if you don't plan on obtaining residency in the UAE, your account opening options will be limited. The reason for this is that even non-resident accounts are designed to support individuals that have already started the process of attaining residency or a visa. However, depending on the bank, branch, and the banker you approach, there are still several account opening options that are available for non-residents that don't intend on establishing ties in the UAE. In addition, there are also several restrictions and limitations that non-residents need to be aware of when banking here. For example, most non-residents can't open checking accounts or current accounts, aren't allowed to have checkbooks, and sometimes have restrictive minimums and maximum rules for account balances. Requirements to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents. Typical personal documentation. Minimum deposits apply, but amounts vary from bank to bank. Maximum limits may also apply. And minimum account activity is enforced. Example, 1 transaction per quarter. Restrictions aside, non-residents can still open a savings account and receive a debit card. Additionally, UAE banks do offer multi-currency accounts with most major currencies available. However, these aren't always available and you'll want to confirm if the bank offers your desired currencies before opening. You'll also want to calculate fees for international transfers in certain currencies. For example, if you plan on converting AED to US dollars to invest in ETFs in Ireland via your European broker, you may be charged significantly higher fees if you choose the wrong UAE bank. Here's an overview of available bank products for non-residents. Savings accounts, debit card, online banking, multi-currency, most major currencies available, and remote opening is possible. More on this in a moment. Bottom line, with the right information, knowing which banks are most open to accepting non-residents and what their account opening quirks are, non-residents can open bank accounts in the UAE without too much hassle. How to open a bank account in the UAE for non-residents remotely. Unfortunately, most people still need to visit the UAE in person to open a bank account. This requirement is mandated by UAE's central bank, which makes the UAE one of a handful of countries where an in-person visit for a bank account opening is almost always required. For private banking, exceptions can be made depending on the bank and banker. However, there are certain situations where some groups can open an account in UAE without visiting a bank. But such opportunities are rare and require an applicant to meet specific parameters. Risks of opening a non-resident bank account in the UAE. Now, obviously there are risks anytime you open a non-resident bank account anywhere in the world. The UAE banks are particularly susceptible to the economic outcome in the local property market and oil industry. So, it's no surprise that during times of global economic turmoil, bank stability becomes a concern. However, during times of economic uncertainty in the past, like the 2008 financial crisis, the UAE government has ensured 100% of depositor accounts. That's certainly one major benefit to having a savings account in the UAE as a non-resident instead of other jurisdictions that offer little to no deposit insurance. Beyond the economy, there are more basic operational account risks to take into consideration as well. For example, UAE banks sometimes charge high non-resident fees and high penalties if your balance drops below a certain threshold. And finally, a warning for anyone that intends to become a resident of the UAE. If you plan on acquiring credit cards, lines of credit, car loans, or mortgages, be warned that there are severe penalties for late payments and default. In fact, many expats have found themselves in prison, literally for missing credit card payments. So, be careful. Otherwise, you might be parking your Ferrari next to the others left behind by fleeing expats at the Dubai airport. How you can start opening a bank account in the UAE for non-residents today. Whether you want to know which banks will accept you, which account opening strategies to use, or just don't know where to begin, we can help. You can get started with GlobalBanks IQ, our international banking intelligence service. It gives you step-by-step instructions and all the tools you need to find and open accounts with top banks around the world. Plus, you'll also unlock our international intelligence reports, account opening strategies, international bank database, and much more. We also have a dedicated US account opening service called GlobalBanks USA, which is 100% focused on helping non-residents, foreigners, and even foreign and offshore companies open bank accounts in the US. It involves direct one-on-one support from our team of experts and includes access to our US banking intelligence reports, US account opening strategies, and US bank database. And of course, there's our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you get access to everything we offer, including all of the benefits in GlobalBanks IQ and GlobalBanks USA. Plus our entire library of premium reports, the entire GlobalBanks database, and dedicated one-on-one support from our team of international banking experts to help you find and open the accounts you need. So, no matter where you are looking to bank in the world, you're only a few clicks away from finding and opening international accounts. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about the available options. And before signing off, don't forget to subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.